Hurricane Helene has caused widespread destruction across parts of the US this week, but one of the most bizarre things we've seen is an increase in car fires. Why? Because when EVs get flooded with salt water, the high voltage batteries can short out and cause them to ignite and go into thermal runaway. As one of my commenters wittily put it, it's a perfect example of the clown world that we live in when houses burn down when it floods. Not only are EVs themselves dangerous when floods occur, but they are also dangerous for people to rely on in times of natural disasters, because the first thing to go out in such situations is the electricity grid. And good luck escaping a flood when your EV is out of power and the grid is down. By contrast, a flood can't stop you putting some diesel in your tank. Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney-based YouTuber. Be sure to follow me on the usual socials for more content, links in the description, and please make sure you're subscribed and have enabled all notifications so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you'd like to support this channel, why not buy me a coffee? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. I reported in my EV news video on Saturday that houses had been burned down in Florida as a result of flooding. Take a look at this video clip.
From flooding to fires, Davis Islands got hit hard by Helene. We'll have another update from that part of Hillsborough County. Fox 13's Ariel Placencia is there. And Ariel, I know that you're standing in front of one of the homes that caught fire. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Linda, in a briefing this morning, the mayor said that 2 homes here on Davis Islands caught fire, and I'm standing in front of one of them. And take a look. This is really tough to look at. I mean, you can basically see right through the house. The outside's completely charred. There's debris everywhere. You really feel for this family here. No reports of any injuries at this hour, but the mayor said this house more than likely burned down because of an electric vehicle. Of course, the exact cause of the blaze is still under investigation. Now, as we were driving around Davis Islands, we saw an electric vehicle that neighbors told us caught fire, completely separate from where I am right now. The owner there said that thankfully nobody was hurt. The home itself did not catch fire, but as you can see, that vehicle is completely damaged.
How does that happen? Unlike internal combustion engine cars, which have a low voltage battery for starting and for things like lights and wipers, EVs have a huge traction battery, frequently running at 400 or 800 volts, with a capacity of tens of kilowatt hours and a current delivery of hundreds of amps. Despite the fact that these batteries are supposed to be sealed, they often aren't due to impacts or corrosion, and then it doesn't take much for water to get inside and cause a short circuit. A short circuit causes localized heating, which can lead to a cell catching fire, which will almost invariably lead to full thermal runaway, with 2,000-degree flames and jets of high-pressure burning gas like blowtorches. Such a fire will burn down the garage and sometimes the house as well, like in the news story earlier. Examples of internal combustion engine cars catching fire in simple flood situations like this are extremely rare by comparison. A Tampa Bay county put out a video showing a Tesla catching fire in water and alerting residents as follows, quote, "If you evacuated and left an electric vehicle or golf cart, hard to tell the difference sometimes, in your garage or under a building and you are not able to get to it or move it, we want you to let us know," unquote. Take a look at the video, which shows a Tesla in a few inches of water spontaneously catching fire. Well, that family will be lucky to have a home left in half an hour or so once that battery fire gets going. And that's a Tesla, not some cheap Chinese rubbish either. But that is really just the start of the problems that EVs cause in times of natural disaster. More worryingly is the fact that almost invariably when such a disaster occurs, be it a hurricane, flood, bushfire or whatever, the first thing to go out is the electricity grid, as poles are knocked over or circuit breakers are tripped. The lights go out. Now, if you have an internal combustion engine car with a tank of fuel, you can get the hell out of there quickly and safely before the situation becomes life-threatening. But what happens if you're in an EV? If you've got some juice in the battery, you're lucky. When the call comes to evacuate, you might be able to get far enough away before your battery runs out. And good luck finding a charging station that's still working, however. And if your EV is out of power, well, too bad. You'll have to try and outrun that advancing bushfire or flood. Yeah, try doing that with a family and small children. And the chances of you having any juice in your EV are going to be cut even further if the mad plans for vehicle-to-grid charging are ever implemented. If you haven't heard of this, it's the insane scheme to suck power back out of your EV battery when the electricity grid is overloaded or unstable, which is precisely what would happen in the event of an unfolding disaster. Before you have a chance to disconnect your car's charging cable, the grid comes under pressure, your EV battery is automatically sucked dry in an attempt to keep the grid operating, but it eventually crashes anyway, and your EV is dead as well. I wish I could say I was making this stuff up, but it's all deadly serious. Contrast this with storing a tank of diesel on your farm. In just a few minutes, your vehicles can be fueled up and ready to take your family to safety. And there are many other consequences of electrification. Imagine the rescuers and first responders being stuck with electric-only vehicles. They might have the luxury of a generator to charge those things back at base, but with battery life far inferior to a full tank of diesel, how long will they be able to operate before needing to be taken off the road for many hours to recharge their batteries? You can fill a diesel truck in a few minutes by comparison. The idea that emergency services can use electric trucks in a disaster situation is a dangerous and life-threatening joke. The following is a great summary of the madness of EVs in times of disaster by Australian Member of Parliament Nola Marino, whose speech in December 2023 has already been forgotten by most people, but it is a timely reminder coming into summer here in Australia and the bushfire season of why electric vehicles are a disaster in natural disasters.
But how would these vehicles work during sudden bushfires, cyclones and/or floods, particularly for those of us who live and work in regional and remote parts of Australia, when there is no power because the poles and wires have been destroyed or damaged? Will our lives and livelihoods be at even greater risk as a result? I want to paint you a picture. In the sudden summer lightning strikes that caused the Yarloop bushfires in 2016, 69,000 hectares was burnt and 2 people lost their lives. With the windy conditions, the fires moved very quickly. Given the time of year, we were home working on our dairy farm. As the fires raged, one of the first things we lost was our electricity. The poles and wires had been burnt. The first thing we had to do was fuel up each of our farm and personal vehicles in case we had to evacuate, and to move those farm vehicles into green paddocks and away from the fires as much as we could. Very quickly, several of our neighbours came to fuel up at our farm fuel tanks because their own vehicles were low on fuel and they didn't have enough fuel to get away when they were told they had to evacuate because the fires were so close. Well, what happens when all or most of these vehicles are electric? According to the government's plan, our personal vehicles, tractors, trucks, utes and motorbikes. How and where will we charge our vehicles at the height of an emergency when there is no power? When towns and communities, whole towns and communities are told to evacuate? How will they get away from the fires, the cyclones or floods when there is little or no charge left in their batteries? Where and how far will we have to go to charge our vehicles or find a charging station that actually works? And if we do, how long will the queues be? And what will be the additional costs of lost vehicles, property and human life as a result of a total dependence on electric vehicles and wind and solar that may also be burnt when there is no power generation? What happens if the power's cut to charging stations because the power lines have burned down? What do we do then? And how much will our insurance premiums increase to cover the cost of the increased risk? And if we're looking at perhaps some of those 1,700 fire and rescue vehicles, will they also have to be electric? And how far are they going to go? And what happens when they're in the middle of a really serious fire of that 69,000 hectares? How often do they need recharging, and where will they go when they're trying to fight the front of a fire?
Wow, the moral of this story is simple. If you live in a bushfire, flood or cyclone-prone area, wherever it be on the planet, ignore the nonsense of the net zero zealots and the evangelists, and never, repeat never, rely on an EV to save you. Always, always, always have a petrol or diesel car or truck and a spare tank of fuel on hand for if the worst happens. It could end up saving not only your life, but those of your family as well.